Alright, Shalom Aleichem everyone. Thank you for listening to this Torah's topic, and it's about Simchas Torah. The topic specifically is about Kavod Torah, how we can honor Torah. And it's going to boil down to two subsections, and then I'm going to have one major resolution, okay? We're going to start with how a king, we're all supposed to give Kavod to, how the king could relate to Kavod Torah. Could he give honor to other people? Is he allowed to give Kavod for mitzvahs? And what happens to Kavod Torah? Is that also okay? Okay, that's the first topic I was going to work on. Second is, what about a Talmid Chacham? A person who is learned, a Torah scholar, is he allowed to do things to other people for going up his Kavod, of his honor? What happens if it's a mitzvah? What happens if it's Kavod Torah? Is that also what they're... And then we're going to try to compare, how do we look at the relative honor that we give to kings and we give to Talmid Chacham? Is one of them greater than the other, and why? That's the topic for tonight, Kavod Torah. And the reason I chose this because, and I picked this title, Most Important Mitzvah, perhaps because I heard one suggested by Rav Yehuda Balzam, Rebbe in DRS, that it could potentially be argued Kavod Torah is the most important mitzvah in all of the mitzvahs. Why, you might ask? Okay. He starts with the Mishnah in Pei. The Mishnah says, we say it all the time in davening, Talmid Torah keneged kulam. Torah is keneged all the other mitzvahs, corresponds to all the other mitzvahs, and perhaps is equal to all the other mitzvahs. It says the Gemara in Brachos, on top of what we just said, Gadol Shimusha Yoter Milamuda. Serving a Talmid Chacham and helping and accommodating for someone who's learning Torah is greater than learning itself. So, you know, if you put those two together, what you come out with is actually Shimush of Talmid Chacham, helping and accommodating someone to learn, is greater than all the other mitzvahs. Now you might ask, well, why would that be? I think our topic tonight may shed light on this, of why Kavod Torah is so primal in Torah, it's so important, but just to give a glimpse of it, I think it has a lot to do with how we approach Torah and approach mitzvahs is a key and inroad to all of our service, all of our avodas Hashem, and it doesn't have to do with the actual content that we learn. Sometimes it has a lot to do with how we approach and how we give a kavod to Torah. So the first source I wanted to deal with tonight, and I think as you give your shiurs, you could pick and choose which sources you decide to do, and you could read them inside, and for the sake of time, I'm going to go through them outside, and you can ask the people in the shiur to read them, and I put the translation for clarity, okay? We're going to have the three major sections as I outlined, and I think you should do the same outline to make it really clear. Start with the king, how do we interact with him, then the Talmid Chacham, and then come back and compare the relative kavod between the king and the Talmid Chacham as they interface. First source is the Gemara in Ksubas that says, what happens when a king is on a crossroad and there's a wedding procession coming by? The Gemara presumes that for sure the king, who we're all supposed to give kavod to, including the people in the wedding procession, should give kavod to first rights go to the king. Once upon a time, says the Gemara, that a king Agrippus met a wedding procession and they came on the crossroads and one had to go first. And the king Agrippus, very nice and humble, and he decided to step back and let the wedding procession go forward. Asked the Gemara, wait a second, that shouldn't be allowed. A king was foregoing on his honor and gave up a little bit of his honor to let other people do things. It's not, his honor is not forgiven. He shouldn't do that. So how did King Agrippus do what he did? Says the Gemara, no, it's okay. Parshas the Drachim Have, he did a very inconspicuous way that no one would tell, because he stopped by the crossroads to tie his shoes in a way that no one could tell. But on the other hand, we have a different contradicting Gemara, it seems. Gemara in Sota that says King Agrippus, the same king, was one time standing there for the Hakel procession, which is very much like this year, a year that's after the Shemitah year on Sukkot, and we're supposed to have the king of Israel read a little bit of Parshas of Sefer Dvarim to Klal Yisrael by the Beis HaMikdash. And that was a major procession in times of the Beis HaMikdash, and today, unfortunately, we no longer have this mitzvah. But in the days of the Beis HaMikdash, we was told, one time King Agrippus was doing the mitzvah of Hakel, he was the king of Israel, and the Gabbayim gave him the Sefer Torah. So he was holding the Sefer Torah in his hand, and instead of sitting down and reading the Sefer Torah like normally is done by the king, he stood up, and the rabbis that were there praised him for what he did. Asked the Gemara, wait a second, isn't that a problem? The king's not supposed to be mochel. He's not supposed to forgo of his kavod. So how did he do what he did? Says the Gemara, no, it's okay. Mitzvah shiny. When you do things to honor a mitzvah, that's okay. Says Tosos, this is the second box already. We dealt with our question. On the one hand, the Gemara in Ksubah says a king should never give his kavod unless he does it very conspicuously. On the other hand, the Gemara in Sota, he's allowed to do for mitzvahs. It says Tosos, I don't understand. When King Agrippus was confronted with the wedding procession in the Gemara in Ksubas, that was also a mitzvah. Why the Gemara forbid that in the Gemara in Ksubas and the Gemara in Sota? The Gemara says that's perfectly fine. Tosos deals with this right on the spot in Ksubas and in Sota. And Ksubas, his answer is all the kavod is really relative. And the kavod that a person gives a king is extremely important, but higher than that is the kavod that a person can give to Torah. When King Agrippa stood for the Torah and held on to that Sefer Torah and rejoiced with it, and just like we're going to do tonight on Simchas Torah, so that was a higher level of kavod than the king's kavod. The king gets one level of kavod, and the kavod of Torah is even higher than that. So when King Agrippa stood for the Torah, that was perfectly fine. That was permitted because he wasn't forgoing of his kavod. That was just showing kavod to the thing that's higher and above him. That's another higher authority above him. As opposed to giving kavod to the wedding procession, he shouldn't have given kavod. You know, because the wedding procession are regular people, that are regular citizens of Israel. They're supposed to give kavod to him. If they're supposed to give kavod to the king, so he's not allowed to be mo. That's Taisut's understanding, which is kavod is very relative, and it depends who we're giving kavod to. If we're giving kavod to Torah, kavod to Torah is primal and surpasses the kavod that we're supposed to give other people. And the regular people kavod, but like the wedding procession, they're supposed to give kavod to him. That's how Tosfos in Ksubas resolves this question. Then I wanted to just point out the way that it's presented in the Tosfos and Sota is slightly different. He says, when it comes to the kavod that you're supposed to give to mitzvahs, maybe that it's so relative that it doesn't even, whenever someone has an obligation to give you respect, so then it turns out that there's no more of a mitzvah for them to respect you if you have the higher level of authority. That's how the Tosfos wants to present over there, is that we have the king's kavod and we have the wedding procession's kavod. Since the king's kavod trumps the kavod of the wedding procession, it turns out there may be no mitzvah giving kavod to the mitzvah of the wedding procession. And that's why the Gemara in Ksubas didn't allow King Agrippa to give kavod to the wedding procession. But and you can discuss what exactly may be the analysis of the Tosfos may be different, but in the global scheme of things, we have one major answer of Tosfos, that the kavod of a king is definitely greater than the wedding procession because that's a regular people kavod, as opposed to the kavod of Torah. We're supposed to respect the Torah above and beyond the kavod that we give to kings. That's the first major source I wanted to deal with, and I thought an inspiring idea I once heard from Rabbi Yitzchak Cohen was particularly on this point that we just talked about at length, is that a king can't be mochel on his kavod. He said, wait a second. The Melch Malchem Lachem, the king of all kings, Hashem, he's mochel on his kavod all the time in the Chumash. He clothed Adam and Chava, and he went to greet Avram Avinu when he was sick, and he went to bury Moshe Rabbeinu. He's mochel on his kavod left and right in Torah. So I don't understand, how is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Melch Malchem Lachem, the biggest king of all, how is he mochel on his kavod? The Gemara says kings are not supposed to be mochel. So Yitzchak Cohen gave a fascinating answer. He said, it depends on how we treat HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have two opportunities, and this is very relevant to the times of the Yom Noraim, as it's coming to inclusion in the Simchas Torah, is where Hashem we look at as Avinu Malkeinu. He's not just a king. Hashem is our father, the king. If we treat him like a father, so you know what? He's a father. Our father can go way above and beyond any king. And he will do for his son way above and beyond than anybody else will do because he loves and cares about his son. A king, so he'll do whatever he needs to do for his servants, but nothing beyond is beneath his dignity. A father will go above and beyond, will risk his life just to make sure to care and love for his children. That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu was able to be mochel on his kavod for us. Is if we treat him like a father and we go like a son for his father, so he'll treat us like children. He'll be mochel on his kavod. As opposed to if we are like slaves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we treat him like servants, and we do just exactly what we need and no more. So maybe Hashem will say, "Oh, you're treating me like servants. Okay, I'll be your king, but I won't be mochel on my kavod for you." I want to move over into a different section, the second topic tonight of how does the Talmid Chacham relate his kavod to other people, and for mitzvahs, is he allowed to forgo his kavod? I started with the Gemara in Bava Metzia, a fascinating story the Gemara presents with Rabbi Yishmael, a major Talmid Chacham. Once was walking on the road and bumped into a pauper schlepping a lot of a bundle of wood, and it was too heavy for him to carry, so he offered to do him a big favor, and he said, "Okay, would you like me to help you carry this bundle?" So the schlepper said, "Yeah, this is way too heavy, I can't do this." So he said, "Sure, can you take some off my back?" So he said, "Okay, I'll buy some of that from you, some of the bundle of wood, and this way I'll make your load a little easier." The pauper was really happy about this. He just got unloaded part of his burden. And so Rabbi Yishmael bought it, and said Rabbi Yishmael, he was a very wise, important Talmid Chacham, and he shouldn't be carrying big burdens in the street. He said, instead of me carrying the wood, I'm just going to leave it around the side of the road, and you, schlepper, can go along your way without that little bundle, and I paid you for it. You made your money. What's the big deal? So the schlepper saw it and said, I can't leave good free wood on the side of the road. I'm going to go pick it up. And he starts picking it up, and soon enough, he's hurting his back again because he has such a big bundle. And Rabbi Shmuel sees this, and he says, okay, I have to help him out. So again, Rabbi Shmuel turns to the guy and says, do you need help carrying this this tremendous burden that you're carrying? He says, oh yes, thank you. Can you help me with this? So Rabbi Shmuel says, sure, I'll help you. And Rabbi Shmuel again pays him for some of the wood of the bundle that he's holding to make his load a little bit easier. And again, Rabbi Shmuel was a big Talmid Chacham and an elderly man, didn't want to carry the wood, and he put it on the side of the street so that the schlepper wouldn't have to carry it, and he gave him his wages. He thought he'd make him happy. And before the schlepper went and grabbed the bundle, because he said it was again free lumber, how could he leave it on the side of the road? Rabbi Shmuel said, okay, I'll make a condition. I'm only going to take this wood and make it hefker, make it ownerless, on condition that you're not going to take it back. That's the end of the story of the Gemara. But what we see from this Gemara is that Rabbi Shmuel, big Talmid Chacham, was not obligated to go out of his way to help somebody else to do something beneath his dignity, to pick up lumber that's too heavy for him to carry. Nonetheless went out of his way, above and beyond what he was supposed to do, just to help out another fellow Jew, and he did it in such a kavodic way to make sure that his fellow Jew got the wages he was supposed to get, and nonetheless, he didn't have to do something that was beneath his dignity and disgraceful to him. So that's one major Gemara that seems like Talmid Chacham was allowed to go all the way beyond the level of the law in order to give up his covenant, in order to help out other people. That's the first Gemara I want to discuss, and it's a fascinating, interesting story that you can think about for yourselves. How Talmid Chacham was supposed to go above and beyond the law. On this Gemara, there are major early authorities, the Rishonim, that discuss this, and they argue how far to take this. The Rush is very restrictive. The Rush, I put here a little biography, and with any of the rabbis I mentioned here, you can always give a little synopsis and make it more colorful. The Rush was a major... So, the Rush was a major early authority that hybrid part of the Ashkenazi and the Sephardi halacha, because he moved from Germany and took some of the Balei Tosos learning and brought it to Sfarad, to Spain, and he incorporated some of the Sephardi halachas over there, and it was a major work of halacha. And the Rosh in our sugya makes a critical comment. He says we have to restrict the law of a Talmid Chacham going beyond and above the law to only where he doesn't disgrace himself, and he does it in a very big covenantic way. That's what he's allowed to do, as opposed to if it's going to be beneath his covenant, that's not allowed, because now he's going to be disgracing what covenant Torah is all about, as opposed to the Rambam. The Rambam says, actually, it's b'derech ha'toiva yasher, it's completely good, and it's advisable and nice for a Talmid to go above and beyond in order to help out another fellow Jew. And says the Beis Yosef, why is he allowed to do that? Isn't that dishonoring the Torah? It says the Beis Yosef, no. For himself, he would never do such a thing, because it had to be beneath his covenant. But for another fellow Jew, because Hashem said so, that's why he's doing it. That's Kavod Hashem. He's doing it because he knows it's a mitzvah to do. So it seems to be a major disagreement between the Rosh as opposed to the Rambam. And this is codified by the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. The Shulchan Aruch follows the Rambam as opposed to the Ramah following the Rosh. But I have a few questions I want to ask on the Rosh. 3, precisely, from different Gemaras that seem to say that Talmid Chacham is allowed to go and forgo some of his covenant. First one, the Gemara in Kedushin that says Rabbi Gamliel served drinks at his son's wedding. Doesn't that indicate clearly that he forgave some of his covenant? And the Gemara actually discusses some of the rabbis at the wedding didn't want to eat from the food because they were saying, how could it be that we're sitting here and Rabbi Gamliel, a major Talmid Chacham, is serving us the foods and drink? So Rabbi Sadok pipes up and says, that's okay. Hashem, who's the Melech Malcham Lachim, who we're supposed to give the biggest covenant to, he forgoes on his covenant all the time to sustain us and give us food and to give us rain, and nonetheless we eat and drink from that. So if Rabbi Gamliel is going to forgo on his covenant, that's okay. That's the first source. That seems to be directly opposed to the Shita of the Rosh. Second is a Gemara in Shabbos that's famous and it's relevant every single Friday afternoon, which says many of the Talmidei Chachamim would prepare Shabbos or parts of Shabbos themselves. And the Gemara gives very, very nice and wonderful examples that, like Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef would chop wood on Friday afternoon, and Rabbi Zera would kindle the fire with some of the twigs in order to prepare for Shabbos themselves. Now, this is a little bit beneath their cover, the Gemara explains, but nonetheless they would do this. Why? Because it's showing cover to Shabbos. Doesn't that seem to indicate that, again, that a Talmid Chacham was allowed to forgo his cover for mitzvahs? That seems to be, again, against the Rosh. I have a third Gemara. The Gemara in Kedushin says that Rav Nachman was building a fence on his roof, and it's a mitzvah, a makeh, to build a fence on a roof so that no one falls off. The question is, wait a second, the Gemara even indicates this, then Rabbi Yehuda was upset with him because a Talmid Chacham is not supposed to be doing certain work, certain physical labors in the public. How did Rav Nachman do this? Doesn't that mean he's forgoing on his covenant? All these questions seem to show that the opinion of the Rosh is not correct. How did the Rosh say that Talmid Chacham, like Rabbi Shmuel, shouldn't have forgone his covenant in order to have Shabbos Aveda, return a lost object to his fellow Jew? So the Be'er Halacha written by the Chavetz Chaim has a wonderful answer. He says, you know what it means? You know what the difference is between a Shabbos Veda and all these other examples I'm giving you? What the critical factor is am I doing it in a way that I'm showing kavod, that I'm doing this p'tafka for a mitzvah? I'm doing this 100% because Hashem said so. So in all the Gemaras I've read, that was clear. It was perfectly evident that I was going to do something for Shabbos because Hashem told me to prepare for Shabbos, or that I was serving drinks at my son's wedding just because the wedding is a big mitzvah. Or the third example we gave was because I want to build a fence on my roof. No one's building a fence on the roof just because for the fun of it. Rav Nachman was building it because he knew he had a mitzvah of makkah. As opposed to a Shabbos Aveda, it's not very clear when I find an object on the street and I pick it up. That means I'm bringing it and returning it to someone else. Maybe it was mine. So that's the only time that the Rosh felt it was disallowed for a Talmid Chacham to do what he did. And I thought the Chavetz Chaim's Raya, his proof to saying such an idea, is incredible in his own right, and it says a lot about Simchas Torah. It says that David HaMelech, who was the king, and a big Talmid Chacham at that, he danced when they brought the Aron from Shiur to Yerushalayim, and he was extremely happy about it and excited, and Michal, his wife, was a little bit upset at the fact that he was dancing so much, and she posed the question, how do you allow to do this? It says, David HaMelech, Nikoloti Odnizos. I'd rather have been disgraced even more. And the Radak says, it doesn't mean he wanted to be disgraced. What he means is, by doing something that could have been understood as a despicable or disgraceful act for a king to do, interpreted in the eyes of the people, this would be a tremendous kavod of Torah, because they will understand why he's doing this. That's what we're doing on Simchas Torah. And people quote from the Gra that the Gra did the same. The Gra, a tremendous Talmid Chacham, normally would be learning and doing very serious things all the time. But when it came to Simchas Torah, he went out of his regular mold of seriousness in order to enjoy and rejoice, to show that we give a lot of kavod to Torah. And I put a story here from Rav Aaron that I thought was telling, is that one time when they were coming back after Rav Aaron was a Rosh Hashiva at YU, and when he was a young man, he went as still he was teaching in YU. He once went on a rally in Washington, D.C., and in 1967, and they came back after a long day's trip, and he was the last one to leave the bus. And guess what? He bent down and he decided to pick up the garbage off the bus floor in order to make the trip, in order to make it easier for the bus driver when he goes back to return the bus at night. There wouldn't be a mess. That's what we could see from a big Talmid Chacham like Rav Aaron Lipton see, but from a lot of these Gemaras and from David HaMelech, what it means for a Talmid Chacham to forgo in his kavod. For kavod of Torah and for kavod of mitzvahs, that's okay. So now I want to take a step back after we presented these two major topics, one about the king, one about the Talmid Chacham, and try to think, how is the relative kavod? What happens when they play it off? Well, which one's greater? So I want to say first, the Gemara in Shavuos says that when a Talmid Chacham comes in front of a court, so it's okay for him not to stand, even though he's a witness. Usually witnesses stand. It's okay for a Talmid Chacham not to stand. Tosfos says, bother, wait a second. But he quotes from a different Gemara that says a king, in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, it says a king has to stand. And even if he's a witness, he has to stand. Says Tosfos, I don't understand. A king's kavod is probably greater than the Talmid Chacham kavod. We're all supposed to give kavod to the king, and a king is not even allowed to be mochel on his kavod. As opposed to Talmid Chacham is allowed to be mochel on his kavod. So I don't understand. Why do we make the Talmid Chacham, why do we allow him to stand as opposed to the king? We make him stand? It says no, this was a beautiful and important message. The type of kavod given to a king is fundamentally different than the type of kavod given to Talmid Chacham. The king's kavod is not his. The kavod of a king is due to the fact that he is ruling over Klal Yisrael. And Klal Yisrael has a lot of dignity. That's why the king has kavod. He's not allowed to give that kavod up because that's not his kavod. As opposed to Talmid Chacham, he worked for it. That was part of his mitzvahs, and it's part of his achievements is that he learned a lot of Torah. For him, he's allowed to forgo his kavod because that's his personal decision whether he wants to give it up. And I heard a wonderful story from Noda Yehuda when he passed away. He wrote in his will that he didn't want people to say haspedim about him because he was a big humble person. And nonetheless, when he died, the rabbi of the town started to give haspedim about him, and his children were upset. How could you give haspedim about our father? They said he didn't want haspedim. Said the rabbi, the Noda Yehuda, he wasn't just a regular Talmid Chacham, and it wasn't just his kavod that we're trying to talk about here. His kavod was the kavod of the town. It was tremendous kavod that such a Gaon, such a major Talmid Chacham lived in our town, and he wasn't right. It wasn't right. It can't be he give up the kavod of other people. And I saw this idea echoed in the Tosfos in Zvachim as well. The same idea that Talmid Chacham worked hard to get his kavod. That's his kavod, and that's Torah Diled. That's something that he's accomplished, and he's allowed to give up this kavod. I want to end off on one thought, which is where does this idea of giving kavod to Torah come from? As we saw in some of the stories, and some of the sources, it actually could be learned from HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. The Chidah quotes one amazing raya, which is that Hashem showed kavod to Avraham Avinu, and Kiviyachal, he stood for Avraham Avinu. What exactly does that mean? We have to check out a little more in the Midrashim. It says in the Midrashim that Hashem stood for Avraham Avinu. Says the Chidah, we learn a tremendous concept, is that showing kavod to Torah is not above anybody. If a Talmud Chacham could do it for another Talmud Chacham, everybody could do it for a Sefer Torah. A king could even do it. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu can do it, we can all learn from his example. And I think all these ideas together teach us this tremendous idea of showing kavod to Torah and appreciating what it means that Hashem gave us our wonderful Torah, and we should treat everybody with respect. Thank you for listening, and I hope your shiurim on Torah tours go very well.